Have you ever been offered money so easy it almost felt like a rescue? Money that could quiet your anxiety tonight. Money that could cover the loan, pay the rent, buy you time. But somewhere inside, you knew it would cost you something you couldn't see on a bank statement. Maybe a client asked you to cut one small corner. Maybe you realized you could overcharge and no one would notice. Maybe you could deliver good enough instead of what you promised. And in that quiet moment, no one watching, no applause, no witnesses, you had to choose. Quick profit today, or a reputation that takes years to build. This story begins right there. Not with success, not with wealth, but with a decision. Because business is rarely destroyed by competition. It is destroyed by compromise. The temptation is never dramatic. It whispers. It justifies. It tells you, just this once. And that's what makes it dangerous. The real battle in business is not market share. It is character. Before we meet the mechanic who faced this choice, before we see what he gained and what he almost lost, ask yourself one question. If no one ever found out, what would you do? Marcus Hayes was 28 years old when he walked away from security. He had a steady job as a mechanic, predictable paycheck, predictable hours, predictable life. And he left it behind to open a small engine repair shop on the edge of town. The garage was tiny. The sign was simple. Honest repairs, fair prices, quality work. That wasn't marketing, that was his promise. Marcus worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, hands covered in grease, back aching from leaning over engines. He fixed lawnmowers, generators, anything small that carried someone's trust with it. He used quality parts, even when cheaper ones would increase his margin. He tested every machine twice before returning it. He sometimes charged less than competitors. Customers appreciated him. They left good reviews. They told friends. But appreciation doesn't always pay bills fast enough. There was a business loan, rent, supplier invoices stacked neatly on his desk like quiet threats. Every night, he counted the day's earnings. Every night, he asked himself the same question. Am I going to make it? Integrity was clear. Cash flow was not. And when you're exhausted, when you're responsible, when you've put everything on the line, that's when temptation starts to look reasonable. Then, one Tuesday morning, temptation pulled into his parking lot. A sleek, black luxury car. Polished, confident, out of place in front of his modest garage. The driver stepped out in an expensive suit and introduced himself as a commercial property owner. In the trunk sat a high-end generator that had failed at one of his buildings. I need it running by tomorrow, the man said. I'll pay you double your rate. Marcus opened the casing, inspected the motor, checked the wiring. His stomach tightened. This wasn't a quick repair. The motor was burned, the wiring damaged. It needed a full rebuild, 4 days minimum, 5 to do it right. When Marcus explained that, the offer changed. Triple the rate. Cash. No paperwork delay. And then the real request surfaced. I'm selling the property soon, the man admitted quietly. I just need it running for a few weeks. Patch it up. Marcus knew he could. A temporary bypass, a shortcut repair. It would hold briefly. No one would trace it back. No one would question it. Nearly $2,000 for 1 day's work. Enough to silence the bank for a month. Enough to breathe again. And suddenly, the line between right and wrong didn't look bold and obvious. It looked thin, negotiable. dangerously convenient. For a few seconds, the garage felt smaller. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Triple pay, cash in hand, no waiting. He imagined the relief. The loan payment covered, rent secured, 1 month without that quiet pressure in his chest. And technically, he could do it. He knew exactly how to bypass the damaged motor. He knew how to reroute the wiring just enough to make it run. It would start. It would hum. It would pass. For a while, the man leaned closer. "No one gets hurt," he said. "It just needs to last a few weeks." That sentence hung in the air. No one gets hurt. But Marcus saw further. The next owner dealing with failure, tenants losing power, his name attached to a repair that wasn't real. And worse than that, he saw his own sign outside the garage. Honest repairs. If he took the money, and the sign would still be there. But it wouldn't mean anything anymore. So he looked up and said the hardest word in business. "No." The man's face tightened. He called Marcus foolish, drove away. And just like that, nearly $2,000 disappeared. Marcus stood alone in the quiet garage. He had protected his principles. But it didn't feel victorious. It felt terrifying. That night, there was no celebration, no quiet pride, no sense of triumph, just silence. Marcus sat at his small desk in the back of the garage, staring at his bank balance. The numbers hadn't changed. The pressure hadn't eased. If anything, it felt heavier. He replayed the moment again and again. Should he have negotiated? Should he have bent just this once? Was integrity a strength or a luxury he couldn't afford? Sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, an old pickup truck rolled into the lot. Frank Morrison stepped out, 72 years old, steady, observant. One of Marcus's first customers. Frank took one look at him and knew something was wrong. Marcus hesitated, then told him everything. The offer, the cash, the refusal, the doubt. Frank listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, then he opened his other hand. "But what? Hundred dos wanast be one done was gavodi gosteniors zendita bestly cost like trie twa gustadied you tauti rudder dice to cutting at sleepless lighted wine, what away to what seduran, obakanta dur, bohai wakan that you could like a predicadwan. Bohai dua axtadir, yet the kai gaxtodinak second luck in Judawat and the condi cop crubs to have to make body to other the quainess to which seedran. The cock ever center said the brown that garda gadan, wagar now the bow growaran. What are can browdy you win, no skin now break it to brack up. Al kakikawi robert the go bar to bad so brand. Warka brat bow. But to start it jolts, and then he opened his other hand. But what you can't see, that's reputation. He leaned forward slightly. Every honest job is a deposit. Every lie is a withdrawal. And son, that account compounds. Marcus didn't feel rich. But for the first time since yesterday, he felt steady. Frank didn't stop there. He reached into his truck and pulled out a small notebook. The cover was worn, pages bent at the corners from years of use. He tore out a sheet and began to write slowly. Rule 1. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. Protect it more than your money. Rule 2. Short-term sacrifice for long-term trust is always a fair trade. Rule 3. The people who value honesty will pay for it. The ones who don't were never your customers. He handed the page to Marcus. Building trust is slow, Frank said calmly. Destroying it is instant. Then he snapped his fingers. One dishonest job, and years of deposits disappear. Marcus thought about the generator again. If it had failed? if word had spread in a town this size. How long before honest repairs became a joke? A week? 2? Frank stood up to leave. "But you won't see the reward tomorrow," he added. "Maybe not next month. But integrity pays interest. It always does." The garage felt different after he left. The bills were still there, the loan still due. But Marcus wasn't calculating survival anymore. He was thinking in decades. The next 2 weeks tested that belief. Business did not suddenly surge. No wave of new customers, no dramatic turnaround. The parking lot still looked mostly empty. The bills still arrived on time. But something subtle had changed inside Marcus. He worked without hesitation. He looked customers in the eye without a flicker of doubt. He didn't second-guess his pricing. He didn't rehearse explanations in his head. There is a quiet strength that comes from having nothing to hide. Then, 3 weeks after the generator incident, a woman walked into the shop near closing time. She owned a local bakery. Her commercial mixer had stopped working. Marcus inspected it carefully. The repair would cost $600. He paused. Then he told her the full truth. For $800, you could buy a new one. That might make more financial sense. She looked at him, surprised. "You're telling me not to pay you?" "I'm telling you what's best for you," he replied. She smiled slowly. "Then I'm paying you." Trust had just made its first visible return. The bakery owner didn't just approve the repair. She told people, other business owners, friends downtown, property managers who were tired of surprise invoices and rushed work. Within a month, 5 new commercial clients called Marcus. Each conversation started almost the same way. "I heard you're the mechanic who tells the truth." Not the cheapest, not the fastest, the honest one. That label began to matter. Reputation, invisible just weeks earlier, was now moving through conversations he wasn't part of. Across coffee shops, across shop counters, across office meetings. And then, 3 months after he turned down the generator job, a familiar luxury car pulled back into his lot. The generator had failed. The quick fix from the other repair shop lasted only 2 weeks. The new property owner was furious. Threats of legal action were circulating. This time, the man who once called Marcus foolish sounded different. Measured, humbled. "How much to fix it properly?" "My normal rate," Marcus said. "No penalty, no revenge pricing, just consistency." He repaired it the right way. Before leaving, the property owner made a decision. All 12 of his commercial buildings would now use Marcus's shop. Integrity had just signed a long-term contract, 6 months after the day he said no. Marcus's garage no longer looked the same. The parking lot that once felt empty now filled before noon. Commercial vans, pickup trucks, equipment trailers lined up patiently. He hired his first employee, then began planning for a second. Revenue didn't grow because he raised his prices. It grew because the right customers found him. Business owners who valued reliability. Property managers who needed someone who would answer the phone months later. People who were tired of shortcuts disguised as efficiency. Word kept spreading, not through advertisements, but through conversations. "Call Marcus, he won't lie to you." That sentence became more powerful than any marketing campaign. Meanwhile, the shops that chased quick transactions stayed busy, but unstable. High turnover, constant complaints, reputation fluctuating with every rushed job. Marcus began to see the difference clearly. There are businesses built on transactions, and there are businesses built on trust. Transactions generate income. Trust generates longevity. The decision that once felt like a financial loss was now the foundation of steady growth. $2,000 had looked urgent, but what he gained was compounding. And compounding over time is quiet until it becomes undeniable. Marcus once stood in his garage staring at nearly $2,000 he chose not to take. At the time, it felt like loss, like risk, like uncertainty. 6 months later, that same decision was worth far more than money. Because reputation is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built in quiet ones, private ones, the moments where no one would know if you compromised. Every day, you are making deposits or withdrawals. Every promise you keep, deposit. Every shortcut you justify, withdrawal. And here's the truth most people learn too late. Money lost can be earned again. Time lost can be adjusted. But trust lost rarely returns the same way. So ask yourself honestly, are you building something that lasts 10 years? Or something that survives this month? Are you chasing transactions or building relationships? If this story made you pause, even for a second, then don't ignore that feeling. Protect your name. Protect your standards. Protect the future version of yourself who will live with today's decisions. If you believe integrity still matters in business, show it. Like this video. Share it with someone building something of their own. And in the comments, tell me, what value will you refuse to compromise, no matter the price?